but the psychologist confirmed with me verbally that Dee has a mild to moderate autism. This was very hard for me to hear. However, from being an educator myself, I know that early intervention is key. I can't thank my cousin Roshonda, my mother, his teachers, principals, psychologists, school, preschool daycare staff, members enough for supporting us throughout this tedious process. They even created me a personal intervention for our family to follow, which led to the development of an IEP for him. With that will help close the gaps throughout his learning journey. I was able to transfer all of those tools he was using in his old preschool to his new kindergarten classroom. The principal from his new school has even reached out to me to welcome me to their school and to let me know that he's been in contact with the teachers and psychologists from the previous school. This leads me to my next point of what I learned. It takes a village. Without the kindness and support of my family, friends, managers, co-workers, everybody, even a random person on the street, sometimes I don't know what I would do. I would have gone alone. I could not have done this without y'all. Thank you so much for supporting my son and I throughout this journey. We love and appreciate you. My cousin Ashley allowed me to share this story, which she posted on her social media profile. She shared this for me to tell you all today and encourage you, other parents that's in the audience, that if you're trying to figure things out, you don't have to go it alone. As a former educator, Ashley was somewhat familiar with the early intervention process. However, she still needed assistance and support. According to research, Black children with autism are 5 times less likely than white kids to receive the early intervention that can make a crucial difference in their long-term development. Ashley's story reminds us that we need to talk more about autism and developmental delays within our community. Ashley has support and a solid group of individuals around her. When she would mention to her friends and family that Dee wasn't saying anything and that he was not hitting certain milestones, she didn't get the, oh, it's okay. Boys always take longer than girls. She did not get the, oh, well, you know, she received the, he'll speak in his own time. She didn't get that. That was poor advice. When she went to Dee's child care provider at his preschool, she didn't get, oh, I know you're a first-time mom, so you don't have to overreact. She didn't receive that from her child care provider. I know as her cousin, she saw all of my Facebook posts on social media about don't wait and see, get your child screened before 3. But she was not really sure what all that meant. Get screened for what? Where do I go? Who do I talk to about this? Now, I'm sure she questioned some things about why Dee was not progressing the way that other children his age were. She probably had questions about how this would affect his early education and how would this affect him going into his elementary school years. The gap between a child who has not received services gets wider and wider as a child gets older. This makes it a little bit easier to see how students who do not get early intervention and assistance can slip through the cracks. Problems with language and speech are only difficult to deal with at a young age, but studies have shown that children who are diagnosed with a developmental delay such as speech delay are more likely to perform poorly in school, have behavioral issues, and experience low self-esteem. In the long run, these are just a few contributing factors that may lead to the domino effect of an inferior education, less effective communication skills, and difficulty finding adequate employment later in life. Early exposure to working with professionals who have training in cultural awareness and understand racial disparities would ensure that Black and brown children are afforded the opportunity to advance at the rate as other students. It truly does take a village, but first, we must have the courage to know when to ask for help. So now we have our panelists. I'd like to have each panelist introduce themselves and just tell a little bit about where they work and how they support families in the early intervention center. I'd like to start with you.
Good afternoon. It's so great to see all of you here, and it's truly heartwarming. I know I can't speak for everyone, but I know this is my passion, and so when I'm able to share that with others, it's such a rewarding experience, and to be able to educate and empower parents. Sometimes as a speech pathologist, I feel like I'm a counselor, and with trying to support families, and so a lot of our sessions are really trying to ask parents lots of questions about how they're doing, what does their day look like. So I am a speech language pathologist here in the Charlotte Concord area. I provide early intervention services to children birth to 21 actually, but the bulk of our caseload is birth to about 10 years of age. So over the past few years, I have definitely worked with a lot more children in that birth to 3-year-old range. And so with early intervention, as a speech language pathologist, we're coming out after we've received that speech referral, and we are making that initial contact with families, going ahead and scheduling that first visit. But those first few sessions, we're all about making a connection with the family and the child. And so if that child does not connect with you, or that family does not connect with you, it's going to be hard to build that trust and for them to actually progress. And so a lot of times that first session may not look like what you think a speech therapy session will look like, or what an early intervention session will look like. And so those first sessions, I'm really just trying to get to know that child. What are their likes? What are their interests? Because most of the time, if you're doing something that they don't want to do, they're not really going to progress or try to reach those milestones or those goals that you've set for them. And so first thing is, with early intervention, it's a lot of asking questions, assessing the area, assessing the family, assessing the child.
Educator and administrator.
So, I'm Titus Hopper. I am excited and honored to be here. I got the email from Meka, and I'm just grateful to be able to participate. So I am the Career Readiness Coordinator for Cleveland County Schools. I live in Kings Mountain, so that's the Shelby, Kings Mountain area. Been a principal for 9 years prior to that. Been in education for 23 years. But what's most interesting is I'm a dad. So I'm a daddy, but I'm also a school administrator and now a district administrator. So, and I'll be honest, when my son was born, everything changed. So I'll be coming from that perspective. And then also I'm the executive pastor of my church, Faith Harvest Church in Shelby. So I'm also coming from that community leadership part. You know what I'm saying? So yes, I'm a ball of passion too.
Good afternoon. My name is Monique Sutton. I am a developmental and behavioral pediatric nurse practitioner. That is a lot to say. Essentially what I do is I work for Atrium. I see patients, they come in, and We're trying to figure out what's going on. We're trying to figure out if what's going on with their behavior is because they have an intellectual disability, because they have autism, because they have ADHD, because they have anxiety. And then once I figure out what's going on, I treat that, whether that requires additional testing, sometimes with the psychologist, sometimes medication management. I have to admit the bulk of what I do is medication management so that my patients can perform to their best expectation at school. I make those referrals for speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and try to give them what they need in the community as well.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm super excited to be here. I'm Devanya Govan-Hunt, and I lead the Charlotte affiliate of the National Black Child Development Institute. And at the Institute, at that affiliate, we actually support Black and brown children and families through education and advocacy. That's what our mission is, that's what our charge is. We walk in that mission by centering the power and the genius of Black families, Black parents, Black families. We see children as whole individuals, so we rely on the power and the wisdom that our families come to the table with first, and we just show them how to ignite what they already have and march into systems that we don't want to hand our children over to and demand better for their families. So we operate in several different buckets, but we can get into that later. Thank you.
You can share. You can share that.
Okay, I got the mic. BCDI Charlotte, I said we mentioned we walk in 5 different buckets. Those buckets are family and community engagement. We do all of this using a strength-based lens, and we use a culturally sensitive and relative approach, which means that we don't allow other folks to tell us how to raise our kids. We also focus on literacy. We have a literacy bucket, a health and wellness bucket, a policy bucket where we actually lean into looking at why our children, starting at the age of 3, are suspended from preschool, looking at disproportionate suspensions and expulsions, and not being able to be afforded the appropriate referrals, not being able to have access to people who provide services that look like them and that understand their communities, actually lead into some of that. So the suspension part is just really a result of a much larger systemic issue. And that's what we lean into. We also focus on early childhood education.
I have a question. So if a patient, how would I get a patient to you? Do I make a referral to you?
So actually, we refer the patient to
Before
you.
we go into it, I'm going to give that's a good question. Before we get into what a referral is, I'd like Dr. Hunt to explain. You mentioned that the BCDI does not allow others to tell us how to raise our kids. So can you define what it takes a village means in regards to BCDI?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned before, we really center whole families, whole children, whole communities. So when we think about the term village, we really are thinking about the extended aunties and uncles. We're thinking about all the wisdom and the truth and the lived experiences that our extended families bring to us. It means that we are actually going to trust the word and the guidance of folks who are closest to us. Our child care providers, just in the stories, Miss Ashley's story that you shared, just as Miss Ashley shared about her child care providers, her school, her doctors, the principals, aunties, uncles, friends, cousins, that's what we mean by the village. It means that we're not gonna go and take the advice of even a practitioner that says, just wait and see. No, don't worry, you're overreacting, because as Black mothers, as Black parents, when we walk into these spaces saying, something's not right, we're often pushed off to the side as if we don't know our own children, or as if our grandmothers and our aunties hadn't raised children and actually know. We might not have the exact terminology for it, but we know our babies. So what I mean by village is that we start with that nucleus, the family first. We really do see parents as the first and most important educator and advocate in their child's life. And we don't just check a box by using that language, we actually truly believe that.
Good, thank you. Monique, according to the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, early intervention is a system of services designed to support families and children ages birth to kindergarten who have or are at risk or are at risk for disabilities. What age can services begin, and what are some of the benefits of beginning early intervention during infancy?
So we believe, well, we know that the earlier you start services, the better the prognosis longevity-wise. So the better the child will do if we implement speech therapy, occupational therapy. So we believe in my office, we start seeing children at like 6 months, but the caveat to that is you can't self-refer. So you can't look at your child and say, something's not right, we want to go to developmental and behavioral pediatrics. That has to be your pediatrician. We only accept referrals from a pediatrician because everybody has concerns about their child. And right now, to be honest, we have 1,000 people on our wait list. And needless to say, that's a lot of work for us. So we need to know that the people that are coming to us truly do have something going on, because unfortunately there are people who are just very hypervigilant. He normally eats 6 Cheerios. Today he's only eating 2. And I need him assessed. And so obviously that would take a lot of time for us to do, and there would be nothing that we could do for that child. And say maybe try multi-grain Cheerios, maybe he doesn't like those. So in order to spend our time doing what we need to do, we do need a referral. But like you said, it is so important that you tell your PCP, no, I do believe that something is not right. No, I'm not leaving. There are lots of screening tests that I know are available. I want you to implement some of those screening tests because something is not right. And I'm not leaving until you tell me. If you can't figure it out, you need to direct me to someone who can.
Now, Monique, you mentioned how you accept referrals from pediatricians for an assessment. How does a parent know that a child has autism? What are some of the things that they should be looking for to inquire about an assessment?
Okay, so a lot of people believe stereotypy, and that's simply repetitive behavior or stimming. So that can be what I refer to as my flappers. So some kids like to do this, or some kids like to rock. Just because you rock does not mean you have autism. My office manager rocks. I can't sit next to her because I always have to do this. I don't like her doing this in my peripheral. And she doesn't have autism. So, and there are certain children who have a propensity for sameness. My oldest daughter, she likes things a certain way. Well, they just may be OCD. She's not, but they just may be OCD. That doesn't necessarily mean they have autism. The biggest thing with autism is this is a child that doesn't have reciprocity. This is a child that doesn't point to show. The child doesn't say, look, mom, or try to get your attention, mommy. This is a child that doesn't care about making friends and doesn't care about playing with other children. We're not talking about just normal parallel play. Other kids are doing parallel play, and this child is sitting on his head. He's looking at the ceiling fan. He's not using the train to move. He likes the wheels on the train. He just wants to see the wheels go round and round. Or sensory issues, hyposensory. So certain things like noises, just the vacuum cleaner, the wash machine. So they like their New Balance shoes, size 3. So when they're a size 5, they're still wearing the size 3 because they cannot transition into another shoe. They like a specific food at a specific time, and if they don't have that, their behavior isn't congruent with what other children might do. There's so many things. I can't think of everything right now off the dome here, but those are just a few things that if your child is engaging in this behavior, and especially with speech, if they're nonverbal or don't understand, if someone walks in the room and they don't acknowledge them, they don't care that they're there, that's not usual. That's not normal. Generally, children look, someone's entered the room, and oftentimes in my exams, I'll walk in a room, I won't say anything, I just do this because it's nonverbal. By about 6 months to 9 months, children realize when people are doing this and doing this. They know that means hello and goodbye. If your child is not looking at you, they're not talking to you, they're not interested in the rest of the world, they're perfectly content watching the ceiling fan, then those are things that I would say definitely we need to look further into.
Thank you. And you mentioned how speech and language development is important in making the connection
Very
for
important.
children with autism. So I'd like Meka to share how speech language pathologists can collaborate with pediatricians, and also what are some early indicators for speech and language delay in children?
So with children with, when you're noticing developmental delays, so just like Dr. Sutton, or Sora Sutton, sorry, mentioned that you can start to see delays as early as 6 months. And so typically around that 18-month time is when we really start getting those referrals, because that's the time when children are repeating everything, they're babbling, they're showing so much interest. So when you don't see those things, those are some signs or some indicators that something may be a little different than what we typically see. And so when you don't see, sometimes we get those things where the child is quiet and you hear people say, "Oh, you have such a good baby," or they're so good. But babies and toddlers should be making noise. Like, they should be talking and babbling when they're in church or wherever, or looking at you or trying to grab things. But sometimes when you'll start to know that there are some developmental delays, or could be some delays, when a child is not babbling. When by the time that they are 2 and they have no words, then those are some indicators that they could be a late talker, but there could be that could be a speech and language disorder. And so when we see that they are not interested, their eye contact is limited, is when you're trying to look at them, even as infants. Like, as soon as your baby is born, their brains are still developing. We need these synapses and all these things to start firing off, because they get that by eye contact, by you talking to them like they're not a baby, because what you do between that birth to even 1 year, birth to 6 months, has a very direct, things that you don't do at that age will severely impact them and their language skills as they get towards that 2-year-old mark. So children need to be looked at, talked to, sang to, all of those things. So when you don't start to see those things, when they're not interested, that's when you should reach out. And like Roshonda stated, that yes, we need to go to the pediatrician. We need to let them know that this is something that I'm noticing. And so instead of that wait and see, it needs to be let's just see, So you want to just see if there's something there, rather than letting that linger in there, You just don't want those things to kind of spill over into that school age range. So I'm not sure sometimes
And so you're leading up. She's setting the stage, and I love that, to talk about. So we started with Monique and said how the pediatricians come into play, and you receive a referral from the pediatrician. But we know that sometimes as grandparents and cousins and family members, we don't know how to typically support that child. And so if a parent or a grandparent or a child care provider even are worried about their child or their family member being delayed, what should they do? Because we know the parent may mention it to the doctor, but what does it look like for a child care director who maybe has a kid in their daycare center that is really having some difficulties? Or what does it look like for we just came off of a Thanksgiving break and Christmas break, and we look off to the corner sometimes and may see a family member that has these different characteristics, but we don't really know how to express them. Can anyone on the panel explain how, because we're all professionals, so we're familiar with the conversation, but what are some ways to get the grandparents and the other family members involved in the conversation? Can anyone like to take a stab at it?
If I could share from the parent and the educator, school administrator perspective. Sometimes as a school administrator, we're caught in the catch-22, and I'll just be transparent. as a principal, I would often say, if the parents would just do this. And then, on the flip side, I would say, if I could get my teachers to just understand and be a little more empathetic. So here I am in the middle, and one thing that I found out as an educator, sometimes we just don't know what we don't know, and that hinders us most often. And I love the wraparound conversation. What's your title again?
Nurse practitioner.
Well, I know that.
Developmental and behavioral pediatric nurse practitioner.
Who knew what that was? So I'm a 46-year-old African-American male, and that was the first time I heard that terminology. Now, nurse practitioner, I've heard it. The specifics of what she does, I'm like, really? So as we begin to talk to our young people about careers, we say, become a doctor. Not knowing that we can become that type of doctor, who we need. Who, if I go into a practice and see someone who looks like me, I'm more willing to open up, I'm more willing to share, I'm more willing to dialogue. So one, there's a need for more, well, let me say greater diversity in some of these career fields, speech pathology, nurse practitioners. So to address your question, I think we would have more of that conversation, more of that village dialogue if we saw people who look like us. So if I go to a doctor and one, just because you don't look like me, I don't trust you, the conversation's gonna be limited. You see what I'm saying? But if I could open up and just say, listen, I'm gonna just be honest with you. Little Johnny is exhibiting these types of behaviors, and my daughter won't do nothing about it, or my daughter don't know what to do about it, or my grandmother or my mom doesn't know what to do about it. Then the village begins to have a conversation, and I'm gonna throw this out there, and then I'm gonna pass the microphone to whoever wants it. There were two types of slaves on the plantation. There was the house Negro, then there was the field Negro. All right? Now, this gonna make sense, I promise you. But the village started to break down then because there was a division amongst the community. Now, when you look at it, amongst the house Negroes, there was information that they only shared among themselves. Then when you look at the field Negro, there was only information that they shared. But there was the breakdown of collaborative conversation and collaborative information. And after Adam and Eve messed up in the garden, even before Cain killed Abel, one of the first things jacked up in the Bible was communication. So if we could open up this wraparound village of communication, then one, there are resources. So I'll be honest, I'm a resource snitch, which means when I hear something that I ain't never know about, I'm gonna tell everybody. I'm the one who goes shopping, and then I'm on the phone and I'm texting, hey, these Johnson & Murphys are 50% off. I need you to come. You know what I'm saying? Before the sale is over. But we have a tendency to sometimes be information hoarders, which means I got it and I don't want nobody else to have it. So one, the fact that you're here, let's share all of this information. So honestly, grandma, who may be the caretaker, should not be lacking information about how to support the grandchildren. Why? Because the village is going to tell it. There is. I'm going to be honest. As a dad, I did not know. My wife did not know because my son had some delays. He wasn't walking, and at 13 months, we started ringing the alarm. Now, it may be nothing, but something's not, we think something's wrong. And before you know it, now here's my gripe. We heard by word of mouth that we could get resources. Our pediatrician didn't tell us. So our son had a little walker. We at the mall, and he got on his straps, he got on his, and we going through the mall, and he rolling. Matter of fact, they knew us at the mall. Here come the hoppers. They go, look at me, your side of the road. Boy, he rolling now. And I never forget, we went to the mall, and he did not need his walker anymore. And folk in the mall literally looking at us and clapping because my son is walking through the mall on his own. Now, he had to walk with his hands up to balance himself. But the lady in Cato's, the lady in the little earring shop, now, we don't know her, they don't know us, but they were clapping because they saw what's up. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know.
Let me just say one thing. Just about like preschool teachers, daycare workers, people in the community. I always tell daycare teachers and preschool workers who come to me like, such and such is not talking, but we have a conference with the parents and I don't want to say anything, like what should I do, I'm afraid. You know, and I look at them and I say, I'm coming in as the communication expert. It is my duty to be able to let you know what I see. That's why you hired me. That's why I'm here. I'm going to be as transparent as I can because I want this child to progress just as much as the parent does, you know? And so as a preschool teacher, I let them know that we are trying to get this child, your job as an early educator, as a preschool teacher, you're trying to get this child from this level to the next level. You want them to grow. So why would you not want to explain to a parent, this is what I see, this is what we're trying to do, and this is where your child is, and we need support to get him to the next level. How can we get this done? These are the resources that we have available. So it's like I'm trying to coach them so they can coach their, talk to their parents during these parent conferences, and they're still, no, I didn't say anything. And I'm just like, we're doing this child a disservice because they're not going to be that cute little 2 and 3 year old for the rest of their lives, And so we have to support them in ways and be willing and open for that, And of course, you can't just try to say things to parents or things because it can be touchy, as an outsider looking in and you don't know the whole situation. However, when you're in certain places and in certain positions, I feel like it is your duty to be in your responsibility to be able to want to see that child progress and have those difficult conversations.
And speaking of difficult conversations, Monique, can you?
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sitting on the edge of my seat because typically when people call BCI Charlotte into their school buildings or to their child care centers, one of the first things that they ask us is about family and community engagement. It's not that our teachers, our early educators don't want to have these conversations with families. They are oftentimes not prepared or supported in their role to have these conversations with families. They're also oftentimes not encouraged to step into their own knowledge and their own superpowers. While we tell them we don't make diagnoses, but you're in this classroom all day long with these children. They spend more waking hours with their child care providers than they do with their parents, oftentimes. And it's just a matter of making sure that they feel supported, they're given the language to use with families. We also encourage them and coach them on using strength-based language because sometimes parents will receive the message better coming from that child care provider that they have a relationship with, as long as we're delivering the message in a way that is a strength-based, using a strength-based approach, and that's uplifting. Oftentimes when children are having difficulties in their centers or their classrooms, the first thing that they say, to your point, is, oh, the parents, oh, the families, oh, that mama, oh, that daddy. Now when they're excelling, they say, oh my gosh, you had a great teacher. Not realizing that they didn't just show up with nothing. They came from strength, they came from power, right? We're just enhancing and encouraging and growing. So they want to receive it, they will receive it. It's just a matter of how we package it. And too many times, our early education professionals, our child care providers, don't have the support or the resources that they ask for. So many of them raise their hands and say, hey, I've got this class full of children or this building full of children. We need X, Y, and Z resources, and they fall on deaf ears, or they don't exist, or they don't have affordable choices to offer families. So the conversation's just kind of lie flat.
I just want to add one small piece to that. Also, as parents, we have to be able to accept when our child is not the Gerber baby. Because I have parents in my office, I have one, the child has autism. Everybody in the office knows he has autism. I have delivered it, I have packaged with a red bow, I've tried different color bows, then I decided, okay, I'm going to let my colleague tell them. My colleague said, don't ever set me up like that. I tried, it didn't work. We are actually sending them to a psychologist to do an ADOS so that the psychologist can tell them.
Monique, what's an ADOS?
It's It's an autism diagnostic observation schedule. It's a specific test to diagnose autism. The test that we did in our office was positive, but my colleague said, I tried, but they basically cussed me out. So I said, yeah, so as parents, we have to be able to accept that information because this child could benefit from speech therapy, occupational therapy, and ABA, applied behavior analysis. It's the only evidence-based therapy that we know does work to help change behavior with children who have autism spectrum disorder. But the parents, if they don't accept the diagnosis, we can't get started on the therapies. So meanwhile, I'm watching this child. He has echolalia, which means when I say hi, he says hi. If I say, how are you? He says, how are you? I say, fine. He says, fine. So he just repeats everything I say. And parents are like, isn't he doing well? And I'm like, no, not really. But there's nothing I can do until they're able to accept it. I can't make referrals until they're ready.
Yeah. I know. I'm getting it because this is the kind of conversation that we all need to be having oftentimes. This speaks to like I mentioned before, a larger systemic issue. We have to normalize that if our children are not okay, we've got to be comfortable enough, and it has to be okay within the village to say, my kid is not okay, I don't know what I'm doing, I need help. We exist in a society where Black folks have been beat up and beat down and put down for so long is you gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If your kid is not okay, it's your fault. You did something wrong. That's not where we come from. We don't come from that. So we have to normalize. We have to put that individualistic, exist in your own bubble, you figured out by yourself, that European thing, we got to put that down in the corner somewhere, and it has to be okay and normalized to say, I need help. And when we come to each other, we come to our sister friends, our uncle friends, our daddy's cousin, brother, our principals, our leaders, and say we need help, we have got to put that judgmental thing that we do, because as educators and as professionals, whether you're professional, your field, any other field, we can read folks up, down, left, right, sideways, and backwards. Especially if they're not doing it the way that we think they should do it. Right. And it sends a message, and people are like, okay, I tried, I'm going to go and try to figure it out by myself. We've got to normalize these kind of conversations within our community.
Say it again.
Yes. And on top of that, if I can encourage everybody who's listening, a diagnosis, that don't mean it's the end of the world. So the deficit thinking, because honestly, there is a narrative that suggests Elon Musk, who is one of the richest men in the world, is on the spectrum. He's on the spectrum. So what does that mean? There's a quote that I actually live my life by that says, in every problem is an opportunity so large that it literally dwarfs the problem. So what happens? See, this is what happened. I think the bell curve. Now, it can be a blessing or a curse. Perspective is everything. So when you look at the bell curve, one of the words that I'm beginning to hate is this word called norm. As an educator, we're testing to the norm. What is normal? Normal only applies until you're the CEO who's hiring, because the CEO don't want normal people. What does the CEO want? The CEO wants exceptional people. They want people who, in other words, if you're normal, your resume probably gonna go in file 13. We wanna know who's gonna stand out. If the wall is white, the CEO's looking for, okay, where's the red guy? I don't want nobody else to blend in. But when it comes to education, guess what we want? The norm. You see what I'm saying? We don't want normal. We want exceptional. And I'm gonna be honest, my son, now he's not on the spectrum, but he was born with a chromosomal abnormality, and he's a little bit delayed. But when I tell y'all, that boy is a genius. In other words, my daughter, she showed, okay, she trying to walk. And before you know it, she was walking. My son, not walking, not walking, not walking. Next day we looking, wow, Michelle, that boy walking. He shows no signs, and then boom, he does it. That's not normal, but you know what? I ain't tripping. You see what I'm saying? He's fell in love with the trumpet. So he couldn't buzz. So guess what? We bought him a mouthpiece. because he couldn't formulate, matter of fact, we was working with Meka. The L and he couldn't blow. We're like, blow your nose. Not your mouth, your nose. He could not blow. But now he can blow his nose. When did you learn to blow your nose? He just did it. Now he's buzzing with the trumpet. So he doesn't show signs of progress. He just, okay, I'm gonna do it. And he did it. So I don't have a deficit mindset concerning my son. Matter of fact, I told his teachers in his IEP meeting, okay, he didn't have all 26 alphabet. I'm fine. We just gonna work with it. Then I come home, I mix the letters up. What's this letter? And he went all 26. You see what I'm saying? Now, that's not quantifiable for the test at the moment when the teacher gave it, but what daddy knows, that boy knows his alphabet. So we'll just continue to support him and continue to communicate with his teachers as well. So I just want you to know, don't get caught up on that word, normal.
Speaking of normal, we have standardized testing. You brought us right into the conversation about standardized testing. So what are the services, or basically how does a child qualify for services? Is there a checklist or some type of developmental milestone or standardized test that for determining autism that the pediatricians are looking at? And then again, we're gonna go to Meka to describe what's available for speech and language.
So as it relates to autism, the pediatrician won't make that diagnosis, but they do like an MCHAT. I'm trying to remember what it stands for, childhood autism screening. I can't remember what the acronym means, but and there's lots of tests out there. And if the child doesn't pass the test, then they determine, okay, they need a referral. They need a referral to developmental and behavioral pediatrics. And so then we go ahead, we make the diagnosis, and with that diagnosis, then we have boxes that we check. We make sure that we send them to speech therapy. We make sure, because sometimes children who have speech delays can be misdiagnosed because maybe they don't talk because they can't talk. And maybe that's frustrating for them, so they have tantrums. And maybe that's why they don't interact with other people. So in order to make the diagnosis autism, we always have to make sure that there's not some other reason. Maybe they're hard of hearing. Maybe they're just in a world where they don't hear what's going on. So we will refer to speech, occupational therapy, and always applied behavior analysis. Look, I got started on this. What was I going with all this?
Standardized testing.
So we implement a CARS, which is the Childhood Autism Rating Scale, but there are other tests like the ADOS, which is initiated by a psychologist. If you don't meet the requirement for our CARS, we don't diagnose you with autism. And in our office and throughout the country, there's 3 levels, and people always think the levels are associated with the severity. The levels are associated with how much support you need. So level 1 needs the least amount of support. Level 2 needs some support, and level 3 needs the most amount of support. And if you get your services started early, we know the prognosis longevity-wise can improve, because I have children who, when I met them years ago, were really struggling just to talk. I have one, he came in the office, I can't get him to be quiet. I kept saying, okay, it's my turn. Okay, Miss Monique gets a turn. And I thought, remember when I couldn't even get him to look at me? So where you're at today, if we can get those service initiated, that's why it's so important for parents to be able to hear the diagnosis, get started on the services, because it doesn't necessarily mean that's where he's gonna end up. We want him to meet his or her personal best. And you don't know what that is. I have kids that can tell you everything about basketball. I don't even like to go into certain things because they hone in on something that they're really good at. And at 5, I have a patient who knows more about math than me. I mean, he's doing trapezoids, he's doing like pre-calc. All of them have a blessing or a talent. And so if we just try to foster that and get them the services, sky's the limit. I agree with you. You just don't know. But we have to first be able to say, okay, where we're at today, we need additional help, and we have to be open to getting that help.
Meka.
usually a speech screening of your child. Lots of daycares or preschool centers will let you know that, that there will be a speech therapist coming out, they're going to do a screening. And so that's just a brief, usually 10, 15 minutes of time with your child, and then they will go through just a list of their comprehension skills, expressive language skills, their articulation skills, their social or pragmatic skills and interaction skills. And so it's just a little assessment that's just, the reason for that is to determine if they need formal or further testing, like a true evaluation. So if your child fails that in one or all of those areas where they're again, that word norm, most of our assessments are a norm reference standardized test. And so, you know, we all have our opinions on standardized testing, and a lot of them aren't as great as others, but we have to use them, and that's what insurance is going to want to see if your child qualifies, if you're paying for services for insurance. So a lot of times assessments, we can be very, even as a therapist and a professional, you're looking at them and you're like, I really wish I could use this assessment, but I really need to use this, you know. So a screening is just 10, 15 minutes with your child to see if we think they need for a further evaluation. So if they do fail part of that, then we'll go to a further, more formal, standardized assessment. And so we're assessing all areas of communication, which is language, articulation, their fluency skills, their social language skills, and that takes a little bit longer. And so that may be an hour or two. Sometimes there are one or two different evaluation sessions that we have to complete, because we want to look at the whole child. We want to look at how they're interacting with their peers. We'll do an observation of them in their classroom or with their family members. We get lots of social, medical information and history from parents. And then we have just booklets and test materials that the child is just asked several questions and looking at pictures and things like that. And so that's when we can really get a formal assessment of how well they are understanding language and using language.
Good, thank you, Meka. So, Mr. Hopper, you talk a lot about how Josiah, he had a team of professionals around him. He had his speech therapist, Meka. He had his occupational PT. Can you, from a parent's perspective, describe who's at the intervention during that time? So we know there's a IFSP, which is the Individualized Family Service Plan. And in early intervention, that's what's needed to get these services along. Can you kind of define what that looked like from a family's perspective? So we've already talked with Monique about the referral possibly coming from the physician and how to talk with the pediatrician. And then from there, the services are coordinated and may perhaps go to a speech language pathologist or an ABA therapist and an occupational therapist. So, you know, we see that it takes a village amongst us, but then as collaborative professionals, we're also coming together to secure diagnosis with this child. So from a parent's perspective, who's at the table? Who's at these meetings? Who's paying for all of this?
We brought everybody we felt we needed to be at the table. We brought them to the table. I'll be transparent. We had several primary care physicians, and if we did not like them, for whatever reason, we said, can you give us another? And we found a physician now. We love her, and we work with her, and she looks like us. And we have nurtured that relationship to the point where we can say, this is what we're thinking. Would you consider referring? And once that conversation takes place, then, okay, we got the referral. Because daddy works and daddy got insurance. And we are people who will sit here and have insurance and won't never use it. I don't understand why we do that. But if you got insurance, see. All right, so because of how he was positioned in the womb, I don't know, in other words, fluid wasn't draining right. So come to find out, okay, there was a hearing and audiology issue. So when we were talking to him, our physician said, now he hears you, but it probably sounds like, if you've ever been in a swimming pool, you can hear people above the water. But so we found out, okay, he just needed tubes. That was simple procedure. All right, so we got his tubes. That took care of that. So now his hearing is better. All right, so we have the audiologist at the table. Okay, he's not walking. We think we need OT. So we had a conversation with our primary care. Would you consider referring? Yeah, she did it. And then we found out our insurance covered it. So we started, and this was like at 13 months. So at 13 months, we started having those conversations. So we had OT, we had PT, because, okay, he's not grabbing things like our daughter. All right, and very briefly, I'm gonna share your story. So my wife and I got married. We were married 5 years. We lost 5 babies in 5 years. We lost 5 babies, 5 years. The Lord finally blessed us with our son. Well, we were 8 months pregnant with our son. I'm doing lunch duty in the cafeteria, walkie-talkie, phone buzzing. I get a text message. Mr. Harper called me ASAP. I text back, okay, when lunch is over, I'll give you a call. Called a lady. She said her daughter's pregnant. They were in no position to keep the child, but we consider adopting. I was like, OMG. So I text my wife. So our son was born December 8th. And we were at home in January 22nd. My wife had to rush to the hospital because the mother said, I don't want to bond with the baby. So as soon as the baby came out, the baby went right to my wife's arm. So we have 2 twins. We call them our twins, our Irish twins. They're 6 weeks apart. She's part of the support system too, because when we couldn't understand what Josiah was saying, my daughter would say, did what he said. So she was his interpreter early on. And she was his coach when he was pushing the little wheel thingy through the mall. She would, come on, Josiah, come on, Josiah. And so she was a part of that support system too. But we had relationship matters. So build a relationship with your primary care. Make yourself more than a patient. Hey, we family. So, and then you could, that creates that dialogue that's sometimes necessary. Because, and then we heard through the grapevine that we could get support early, and then they came to the house. They came to the house to do an evaluation, and then from there came more referrals, and which led up to when we got to the point where they could do Mom's Morning Out. We did that. They would come to the school. So they went to the school, and because he had an IEP, no, we didn't have to pay for that because that's state-supported programming. So there are resources, and we just need to build those relationships, share that information, share that knowledge, so we can take advantage and get our children the support that they need.
I just wanted to say also, a lot of people think if you have Medicaid that they're not going to, cover the services. Actually, I love Medicaid. They don't give me any hassle. They will pay for speech therapy, occupational therapy, ABA therapy, any therapy, art therapy, anything I ask for, Medicaid pays for. It's the private insurance that requires me to jump through a hula hoop with flames. And then they deny it. So private insurance is harder to work with. Medicaid is so easy to work with, but to your point, definitely the services in the school. So some of my families who do have private insurance, unfortunately, they can't afford to pay the copay for the therapies. So I'm like, well, let's see what the school will do. And the school will offer some of those services, but the threshold sometimes the school requires them to meet. I'm like, now you don't understand him. But the school will say, no, we understand him. So they won't allow some of my patients to get the therapy. So we have to work a little bit harder. And I don't have a social worker. I'm also / social worker. So sometimes if I call the school on behalf of the patient, the school will sometimes say, well, maybe we can offer 30 minutes twice a week. So if I go and do a little bit more, sometimes the school will offer it, but not all the time. Sometimes it's a hard stop no.
And can I add something to that? And I'll pass the mic. Make people tell you no. Make them tell you no. Keep asking. We have to learn to advocate. You see what I'm saying? Because sometimes no don't mean no. Sometimes no means I just don't want to do it for you. Sometimes no means I said no because I really don't know, but after you asked and then they said no, they went and did some research and found out, well, maybe I could have and just didn't call you back. We have to learn to advocate. True story, and I'm going to pass the mic to you. So my wife had a transabdominal cerclage. She could not labor when we were having our son. She started feeling pains. We go to the doctor. The the midwife was getting ready to send us home by saying, well, we've put the machine on you. We're not showing that you're laboring. So they were going to send us home. And my wife, because my wife is a nurse, and my wife is one of those type A personality nurses, she was like, I am not leaving here till you find I'm not leaving. And because she was adamant and advocate, I'm not leaving, we ain't going nowhere. Then the doctor came, and next thing we hear, okay, let's go downstairs and have a baby. What would have happened had we not advocated? We have to learn to advocate and demand no, because sometimes no don't mean no.
Thank you. That's actually where I was going. That's where I was going. Know that you have the right to ask for more, to ask for better, to ask for what you think is appropriate, to ask for a different person, to advocate for your child. You have the right to do that. I don't care who that person is, that practitioner is on the other side of that door or across that threshold. That's your child. That is your baby. That is your child. You have the right to ask for more. Make them tell you no. And if they tell you no, demand to understand why they're telling you no. And if they don't tell you, you go to the next person and the next person. And if they keep telling you no, you come call BCDI Charlotte because we got your back. We got your back. So in terms of being an advocate, Meka mentioned earlier about how important it is. I hear this domino thing happening. They're talking and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's connected to this and that's connected to that. Being able to have a conversation with your child, being able to read to your child, sing to your child, to share the art of conversation is one of the most basic and the strongest literacy technique that you can use, right? So we're talking about things that need to be in place before they even reach the school system. That's one of the easiest ways. That's a pre-literacy activity right there. That's emergent literacy. It's important. So when you notice red flags and when you're not sure, or somebody, so y'all know that's developmentally appropriate, don't worry about it, but you know in your gut, this baby or this child is not responding in the manner that I think they should be responding, ask for help. Ask somebody, because you know that something might not be right. If they are not being able to connect what they hear, right, to what's coming out of their mouth, being able to connect the written word with the spoken word, and vice versa, you're gonna have some issues teaching them how to read. You're gonna have some issues when they get into the school system. They're gonna be already behind by then. Right now, only 14% of our kids are actually reading at grade level. I'm talking about our kids. They didn't hear me. I said 14%. Do you know what that means? That means that our babies are in trouble. That means that there were some kids who probably had some delays who were told, that parents were told to just, oh, let's wait and see, and they didn't know that they could ask for better or ask for more, ask for a different opinion. And it was too late by the time they found out. So by the time they enter kindergarten, they're already behind. Only 12% of kids who don't have serious intervention when it comes to language and speech before they leave second grade actually climb up out of that threshold with ease. Only 12%. Which means that when they roll into third grade, they have even bigger problems, right? Because of the standardized tests, because of the norm that people are looking at, a norm that was not designed for our kids. Because of that norm, they're in trouble. Third grade is one of the highest predictors of high school graduation and future academic success.
And construction of prisons.
Absolutely. So it's connected. If you know that there is an issue or you feel in your gut but you're not quite sure that there is an issue, ask your child care provider. Ask your sister friend. Call Meka. What's your last name? Call Dr. Sutton. And ask for a different opinion. Ask for help. And if somebody's sitting you down and saying, hey, I think there might be an issue, let's take this even further, don't be afraid to accept the response. Don't be afraid to accept the resource and exercise and operationalize those resources. It doesn't mean that you did something wrong. The only time we can say that we did something wrong is if we don't act on it. And when we don't act on it, because of whatever society has told us, right, in terms of whether we accept help or not, we are setting our children up for failure, for lifetime failure.